wild mother and a young baby that were rescued from an oil palm plantation. You see she hasn't been eating a lot lately. You can see all her ribs. And if you look at the kids' eyes, you see a real look of despair in the eyes. They come in at the rate of 1 or 2 a week in some areas of Borneo these days. The one on the bottom left is a near-adult male that was burned to death. Apparently he met some local people on a path. I don't know what he was doing. They threw kerosene on him and set him on fire. On the top, you see the other source of problem for orangutans is that they're being hunted to satisfy human demands, either for food, for entertainment. These are skulls that were for sale in tourist shops in local cities, and in fact, recently people have found orangutan skulls for sale on eBay. And on the bottom, of course, the guys I see, the little orphans that are returned for rehabilitation because they've been taken captive for sale in the illegal wildlife trade. Okay? So how does the kind of stuff that I work on offer any help at all? Well, I think there are 2 things. One is that in the field, because there are a lot of conflicts between orangutans and humans, if you know something about orangutans, how orangutans think, and other things about how they behave, you can probably do a better job of helping local people or companies come up with ways of designing their programs so that you reduce the amount of conflict between humans and orangutans. One place that I know, an oil palm plantation, was very proud of the fact that it had planted a lot of fruit trees for the local people that worked at the oil palm plantation. It wasn't nice they were enriching, but where they planted them was right in an area where orangutans went through. Gee gosh, the orangutans came in and ate off them. I probably thought it was great, but obviously it just meant that orangutans were coming to human areas and get themselves into problems. Internationally, there's also some interesting things that have been going on. United Nations Environmental Program, in conjunction with GRASP, which is the Red Ape Survival Project, in 2005 developed and presented what they called the Kinshasa Declaration. It was a declaration that was a commitment to protect the great apes from extinction, all the great apes, and they managed to get almost all of the great ape habitat countries in the world to sign on to this declaration. It's not binding, but at least countries are now saying, yes, we wish to do something to try and improve the situation from great apes and make sure they don't go extinct. One of the things that's very interesting is that one of the arguments that convinced people that convinced the United Nations to do this was that the great apes are of extraordinary value to humans because they are so intelligent. Their intelligence is so much like ours that we should consider them very much worth preserving because they tell us a lot about our own heritage. So even though the kind of stuff I do is pretty academic, there are ways in which it can have a much larger set of implications in the world, and you do see some use in what's been happening lately. In terms of what it would take to look after orangutans, I think of it as the will. I don't know if any of you have run across this. I just bumped into this on the internet one day. It's a saying, I don't know whether Geronimo really did say this or it's just attributed, but I think it's a good one. It's Geronimo was an Apache chief, and the line is, with all this land, why is there no room for the Apache? Now, you can think exactly the same thing is happening to orangutans. Borneo is the 3rd largest island in the whole world. It's an enormous place, and there are only 50,000 orangutans left. How is it that we can't find space for them? It really can't be that bad. And basically the same thing is happening to local people in Borneo, the normal residents of Borneo. They're getting kicked out by big industries that are coming in and displacing them the same way that we displaced our native peoples. What would it take to take care of orangutans, and what would it benefit you? This is a well-known story, but I might as well pass it on. One orangutan in Borneo probably needs an area of forest of 5 or 6 square kilometers to survive because of the range of foods that they need. If you thought about a community of maybe a couple over 100 orangutans, that would be a community large enough to survive on its own. You could imagine that's a much bigger expanse of forest. And because you're talking about that much forest, what people often say is orangutans are umbrella species. They're the kinds of species that could provide an umbrella for other life. So if you can protect enough forest for orangutans, you're also protecting an awful lot of other things. Indonesia is extraordinarily rich in biodiversity, both in terms of its plants and its animals. So if you could protect enough land to support a community of orangutans, you'd also be protecting sun bears, hornbills, extraordinary orchids, and all kinds of other species that would also share that forest. You'd also be providing local people, and there are a couple of million of them in Borneo, with better water and access to forest products. If you're turning everything into plantations, there's not much for local people to make use of. Water would be better quality. With the forest being cut down, what happens is the quality of water is reducing, partly because of the pesticides and fertilizers that are being used by plantations, and second, also that the quantity of water is changing and the control is changing. Places both get more floods, worse floods, and worse droughts than they used to have in the past because the forest isn't there to act as a sponge to maintain and control the flow of water. If you had the forest maintained for orangutans, you'd have much better circumstances in terms of water. And on the large scale, in terms of the whole island, because Borneo is such a large island, it probably has a fairly major influence on climatic patterns. So for example, the El Nino oscillation comes through and hits Borneo, and probably because of the structure of Borneo, it has a major influence on how that pattern works out. So keeping that island well forested is probably an important piece in maintaining relatively normal climate patterns. And we know already with deforestation in Borneo that the El Nino cycles are coming in more frequently than they used to. So we've already damaged it enough that we're getting big problems. After all that, then I'll just end off by saying for orangutans, one way or another, we're all hoping you can lend a hand because they really need all the help they can get. I hope I've convinced you they're great people and really worth taking care of, and I hope some of you anyway will think they're worth helping out. So thank you very much.